We are in New York with such great pleasure, and we are specifically downtown, not far from NYU, but forget NYU. We are at the Renee and Chaim Gross Foundation on LaGuardia Place. So happy to be here, and we are really grateful to Sasha Davis, who's the executive director of this foundation, and Brittany Cassandra, who's the director of collections. Rather than me saying what this is all about, would you say a word or two about what's happening here?
Absolutely. Thank you, Al, and welcome to ModPo. We're so excited to have you here today. We preserve and interpret the historic home, studio, and art collections of Chaim and Renee Gross. Chaim Gross was a 20th century sculptor, mostly known for his wood carvings. In addition to programming like we have today, we also have house and studio tours, which are offered Wednesdays through Saturdays. People can book tickets online on our website, which is rcgrossfoundation.org. We are a 501c3 not-for-profit organization, so we also have additional educational programming as well.
And right now we're actually on the third floor, the living room, dining room, and kitchen, where the Grosses, were, surrounded by their art collection, which includes African and Oceanic arts, pre-Columbian arts, decorative arts, European and American modern arts. So we're surrounded right now with people like Jacob Lawrence, Louise Nevelson, who's behind me.
Can you point to the Louise Nevelson?
Joseph Stella. And Jose Clemente Orozco, just to name a few. So we hope that you come visit us. Enjoy.
And Mimi Gross, the daughter of the aforementioned parents, is a dear friend of poetry and of poets, and I just thought I would shout out to Mimi. So, Brittany, what's the best thing that you know about Mimi Gross? Say something great about Mimi.
That's a great question.
I know, you didn't expect it.
She is so full of life, and she has such a great understanding of kind of just everything. In the collection, sometimes when we have trouble putting things on the walls, she's always giving a slight suggestion, well, what if you put this there instead? And just her knowledge of kind of everything is pretty great.
And partly because she's not just the daughter, but she's a visual artist.
She's an artist too.
Herself.
Yeah, her work is on the wall behind us also.
Amazing. All right, Sasha, two questions. One is, you guys have done a lot of shows and exhibits. What's the most radical one that you've done, the most groundbreaking one?
Definitely Artists and Immigrants, which was our exhibition in 2022, and that focused on 50 immigrant artists from our collection. Originally started out as a series of lectures that we were doing sort of during the COVID closure, and then ended up being a really impactful, not only exhibition, but also a publication as well.
Was the anti-immigrant sensibility that's around us in this country and elsewhere on your mind? And if so, how did that manifest itself in putting it together?
Absolutely. Even though this is quite a few years ago, this was absolutely on our mind, and we really wanted to show not only the importance of immigrant artists, but also their varied stories. We also focused a lot on 20th century history, which shows that there was a lot of anti-immigrant bias throughout that period of time, and against certain specific groups as well. Both Chaim and Renee were immigrants. They both came in 1921. Although Chaim was a teenager at that point, Renee was still a child coming with her family. They had very different experiences, but they were really able to be successful and make lives for themselves here in New York and also in the United States.
All right, one more question, a throwaway. Who's the most famous person ever to come into the foundation?
Recently?
Anytime. Recently, yes. I know recently a famous person.
Well, I was just going to name drop Jude Law, who was here for a photo shoot.
Recently, right?
About, 3 weeks ago? Yeah, so that will be in Document Journal, November's 2025 issue.
And you wouldn't have mentioned that had Jude Law not been a very nice person.
Correct.
So
yes.
It turns out Jude Law is a nice person.
He is.
Okay, you've heard it first here. You got to tune into some crazy, out-of-the-way video for poetry course to find out how nice Jude Law is. Thank you both so much for having us here. We're very excited about this. Kay Gabriel has joined us. Hi, Kay.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm fabulous. It's good to be here.
We're really, really grateful that you took the time
Welcome to New York.
come. Yeah. New York's going to be a great town one of these days. And Leanne Brown. It sure is.
Isn't there a photo of Jean Genet downstairs too? He's pretty famous.
Sasha, is there a Jean Genet photo? Was he in the space?
Oh, maybe
Sorry,
I
you're
think so.
dreaming.
There's
You're
somebody
dreaming.
with a bald head.
Jude Law, Jean Genet.
Allen Ginsberg was here.
Ginsberg.
Alan Ginsberg
Yeah.
was sitting at the dining room table.
Sasha is saying that Alan was here.
Okay.
You know,
I'll have to
he
look
was sometime.
again.
All right,
Yeah.
we're already digressing, people,
Yeah,
and of
I'm
course
like
it's
that,
my own
yeah.
fucking fault. Can you imagine?
I'm
that I've caused-
pre-associative.
Okay, so we have this wonderful what? What?
Pre-associative.
We've noticed that. But that's okay.
She's
This is
laughing
going to
anyway.
be. But you know, Bernadette encourages that.
Yeah.
Of course she does. Although
And
she's
she
totally
would
in
want
control.
Janae to be here.
She would want a whole lot.
She
of
would want Janae here.
interesting
I
people.
would like that.
So we have a poem that we're going to stipulate that anybody seeing this video will have read on their own. It's called The Complete Introductory Lectures on Poetry, which, by the way, is a almost quote, a reference to another book of that title, but we'll get to that later. And here it is. So I thought it might be fun for us to go down the line, there are 5 of us, just to toss in a word, a phrase, or at most a sentence on a topic or a theme you absolutely want this conversation to include. Something about this poem or about Bernadette in this poem that must be talked about. Sophia DeRose. Oh, I forgot to say hello. Sophia DeRose and Lainey Brown. And Lainey Brown, I don't do a lot of bowing down because it's such an awkward gesture in 2025, but I think you're marvelous. You have chosen
Thank you.
not just this poem, but we've been recording. You will find them scattered all throughout, here and there in ModPo Plus. So I should have said it for all the others, but I'll say it now. You have curated the choices, and you are a connoisseur of choosing the right Bernadette Mayer. And in this case, I don't mean to sort of say something that won't be said inevitably by everybody, but this is so aligned with how we feel about poetry and about art.
Mm-hmm.
And so this works
Thank
really
you,
well. Thank
Alan.
you for the choice. Okay, Sophia DeRose, pick a topic. Toss it out on the table.
I think it would be interesting to talk about just the sound of this poem.
Sound. Will you write these down? Because I'm not going to remember all 5. Sound. Okay, Lainey.
I would love to talk about what this poem might be saying about how one learns and how one becomes a poet.
It's a meta-pedagogical poem.
It's metapedagogical.
Oh my goodness. Okay, Leanne, you got that? Leanne Brown.
I think that this poem is full of key words of Bernadette's practice.
So
Sublime,
keywords.
moth, we can get to them, but those
So
two
you would say
especially.
that she's dropping in Bernadettean
Yeah.
keynotes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Science.
Science.
I would like to talk about science
Okay.
and Bernadette's relationship to science.
Perfect. And I will add the radical dream that art, and particularly poetry, will be shared rather than squirreled away somewhere that nobody can have access to it. In other words, community. Arts community. Okay. So Kay, I think you came the furthest, did you?
Did I? I came from Greenpoint. Is that the furthest?
I think it, well, technically. we
Sure,
can-
I'll take it.
We can, so Kay, you get to, Sophia's going to read out the list and you get to choose, and science might be the one you choose, but you can choose any of the themes that we'll start with. I promise we'll get to all of them. Want to read them?
The themes are sound, learning, specifically how one becomes a poet, key Bernadette words like sublime and moth, science, and the radical dream that art will be shared.
Okay. You want to talk about science?
I want to talk about science, yeah. I'm excited to talk about everything. I want to talk about science. One thing that I think is really fascinating about Bernadette's work is that she has, as far as what I believe to be a really sincere and profound and lifelong orientation to the idea that poetry is a science or could be a science, and to think of herself as a scientist. It's a word that comes up a lot. There's a completionism in her orientation to knowledge and her desire for a book that could tell everything. Everything, of course, is a major word for her. The desire to know everything, even to just have a bookmark in there that points you to something else, so that all people doing something together could actually approach an encyclopedic knowledge. And I think a good example of this is, for instance, in Midwinter Day, when she includes like a catalog of all the sciences followed by all possible schools of painting. And I think that there is something that's coming up in here where she names this delightfully impossible desire to become an expert on something just because the book that you're reading has a really ambitious title.
Yeah.
Like The Pleasure Principle, or Anxiety, or Coup d'etat, or The Origin of Species.
Right.
So there is an orientation towards a total knowledge that we are being invited into, even though we're also being invited to laugh at it and to laugh at the desire of like, oh, I once thought that I might become an expert on everything just because I absorbed the book that had that title.
Fantastic. Okay, let's respond to Kay's discussion of science and also the completionist encyclopedic urge that Bernadette has. Who wants to say something? Leanne.
Well, it just reminds me of one of her things she would always say is, read the Steins, Einstein, Wittgenstein, and Gertrude Stein. So like that kind of encyclopedic range of science, beginning with the scientist, you know. Yeah.
Lainey?
Yeah, I love this conversation. I would add that another way to think about her interest in science is her infamous experiments. Science are experimenting, a creative, collaborative laboratory, but also her voracious interest in the natural world, in plants and animals, in what's happening in the planet. And I would call her an ecological poet as well. And also brain science was particularly of interest to her, dream science.
Right. Sophia?
I really appreciate what Kay said, because I feel like in this stanza with all these titles, there's a tension between like the consumption and the comprehension.
Yeah.
And it's like, she's not saying don't read the books. Like, she's saying read the books and do more too. And I like that, the open-endedness of that.
Yeah, I mean, it was when the words, so we're not so sure that this list of books, which she read, is that these are to be discarded in favor of a different kind of comprehensive or synthetic knowledge, which she's so good at. However, we are to think that like there's got to be more than the false leaves of these things. And I'll just throw in the complete introductory lectures on poetry is riffing on Freud, the complete introductory lectures on psychoanalysis, where this guy dared to come to the United States and say, I am going to, in a series of lectures, I'm going to tell you everything about the science of psychoanalysis. So that kind of, the nerve he had of being this comprehensive is very interesting to her. And two of the books are Freud's books that she's reading. Kay, what do you think of what we've said about your idea about science? How are we doing?
Yeah, I mean, I think that this really gets at the kernel of it. The psychoanalysis element, I think, is critical here, because that to her is really kind of an essential science. And she, I'm not going to say takes it at face value, but I think that she engages it like with great curiosity and like depth of learning, without formal training. And she does that really early on, initially as an analysand, as just like somebody in analysis, and with curiosity about, well, what does Freud say? What does Lacan say? That is to her part of the science. The other thing that's on my mind here is this phrase. It was when the words on the covers of books, that it was when I started to read these things that I first began to entertain what is sublime. So she's already setting you up to, move through this kind of humorous, again, impossible goal of mastering everything, right, to see, well, what did that make possible? I first began to entertain what is sublime. She's like setting, and this is really, I think, maybe related to the pedagogy question, but she's setting you up to think about depths in a process of actually, okay, that was an absurd desire to master everything,
Right.
but what did it make possible?
Right. Oh, I love that. So interesting. Why don't we turn to the metapedagogical thing, Lainey? I'll just tee it off by saying that this structure, which is not that common for Bernadette, it was when, and then the last stanza, it is to think that. It's almost a propositional language, and it is the fabulous everything, right? The thing that happened, the most important thing I want to convey here is it, and it occurred when. It is to think, the thing I want to deal with. So metapedagogical, that's pretty big.
I think that we see an evolution in the poem, stanza by stanza, of different ways that one may come to understand language and to explore the world through language. So, and not discarding what comes before, but like continuing to open as it goes on. So, starting with reading in the first stanza, and in the second stanza, the revelation that reading is great, but you also need experience. Like, you can't only have books. And then in the next language, there's this really interesting image of grammar as kind of this spectral thing. And then we get circadian rhythms in dreams, and then stages of development and memory in the fifth one, and, you know, an anti-capitalist statement. So it seems like there's this evolution of thinking that it gathers more possibilities as a poem moves.
And Sophia and Leanne, there are also references to forms of writing. So it's a metapoem in that sense. There's the notes in the back of a discarded envelope, which is so Bernadette, right? Then there's the epigrammatic quality of making statements and so forth. So how do, Leanne, Sophia, how do the references to forms of writing and composition in her style help the metapedagogical aspect of the thing? Whoa.
Well, I feel like the first line, it was when the words on the covers of books, it sounds to me like there's this kind of, like she's answering a question that someone asked her. Like, when did you think about this? She goes, oh, it was when the words on the cover, like, it feels like the continuation of a conversation. And I feel like that allows the poem to feel like I can get into it really well. Like, it's already opened itself to me, and I can just kind of like fall in. I think that there's this like a playfulness to the language she uses, like, of the too bright night to verify the city light. Like, it's charming in that way, because she's saying like the whole system of language, the like words are coming from the world, and look what they can do, look how they can sound, like look how fun it is to use them. Yeah, that's how I'll answer that.
Leanne,
The,
go ahead, please.
well, the main thing I'm thinking about is the tension and the contrast between the form of the epigram, which I see here as the titles of the books, and also headlines. And she did a lot with epigrams. She wrote a lot of epigrams, but also this is in the book sonnets. So it's like an overflowing sonnet. It's like the shortest, monostitch poem that she writes, and then this container of the sonnet that she overflows. Instead of starting a new sonnet, she's expanding into all these thoughts. And I don't want to stop talking until I say the third line is inviting the ultimate speculation of love. Love is the subject of the poem, too, the love of knowledge and learning and people.
Yeah. Kate, we get the her compulsion to read and get that total knowledge is likened to the moth. She doesn't complete the thought moth to flame, but it's the moth to the flame of these books, the light of these books. And then light comes back twice. We've got the city's light, and where else do we have it? We have the bright night. So same line. So it seemed like, am I crazy to say that this kind of it's an listen, moths have no choice but to do this. So this is an unconscious, or it's a hardwired thing for her to do this. It's part of her. But so is her attraction to the city, to the lights of the city. Those two things are kind of equal. I didn't really ask a question, but what are your thoughts about the moth?
It's interesting that she doesn't actually. I guess I have a few thoughts about that. One is that she doesn't actually complete the thought, so she just kind of like lets it hang there like a moth. I thought by reading,
Right.
That's. I mean the as it were filling in the cliche is like a moth to a flame or that's where the mind will go, but she doesn't actually finish it, so she just kind of like lets you figure out like, well, what did I mean by that? And that's kind of I think that's an interesting tease. Is it maybe also more that she's like that she's fluttering? Is it about motion? I mean, she doesn't.
She's eating cloth the books because that's what moths do as well.
She doesn't tell you.
Yeah.
So it's sort of like I like that Bernadette is a little bit like loose and almost like and playful and maybe even a little bit sloppy with her similes. She's just throwing the idea out there, and she doesn't actually like need it to be like a super tight image. So that's one thought. The other thing on my mind here is her. On the one hand, we're thinking about the her appreciation, like deep appreciation of expertise. And she actually is like interested in discipline and knowledge and people dedicating themselves to learning about something and sharing it. She's not like pessimistic about that. She's really optimistic about the capacities of the human mind to develop ideas and share them with a lot of people. And at the same time, she has a really deep generosity and interest and curiosity in how people come to know the things that they think they know, right? And so, you have these books that almost intimidate you with the knowledge in them, and then the, let's say, more humble and everyday ways that a lot of people come to the ideas that they have notes on the back of a discarded envelope, grammar in the shadows slanted on the wall. So the kind of this idea that there's like even a syntax of like light falling from a street lamp onto your bedroom wall or something like that, right? Like that image. Obviously the knowledge of child rearing, the knowledge of thinking about, with kids, about animal dangers and learning to swim. She's interested in all of those means of people acquiring knowledge and sharing it together.
What's so democratic about Bernadette is that she's, as Kay and others have been saying, she's very serious about learning from these classics, these important books. Darwin, The Origin of Species, Freud on jokes. But she equally feels that the Dream's public epigrams can be just as knowledge sharing, just as educational.
Yeah.
She thinks it's all equally important. What else is on that list, Sophia? We've covered 2 things and maybe 2.5 things.
Sound,
Sound.
how one becomes a poet, and like key Bernadette words. But we talked about moth a little bit. We didn't talk about sublime.
I think we
put
gotta talk
sound
about
and-
moth some more though. But,
Let's talk about sound for a second.
okay.
Okay.
We can hold them off, all right.
Yeah, that was yours, sound.
I mean, I mentioned a little bit with like some of the rhymes or just like plus memories of reptilian appellations. Like it's just chewy. Like it's fun to say, and I think that helps amplify this idea that like language can be both survival and playful. Like our stages of learning to swim at a past day camp. That's like a fun memory, but it's also necessary so a child doesn't die when they're at camp. She's wrapping like our communal instinct for survival like into the same package as our communal instinct for knowledge and for community and for talking to each other.
Wonderful.
I just got that line for the first time, the reptilian appellations for the stages of learning to swim, like the guppies and the different stages.
That's exactly what it is. Hi,
Yeah.
you've graduated to porpoise.
Yeah.
Did I pronounce that right? Porpoise, yes.
Yeah.
I was a porpoise. No, that's exactly what it is. I didn't think of it either. Because Freud's on my mind,
Like it's
I kept
Frost
thinking about the way in which the, kids are very Freudian. They just like,
Ah.
Okay, key Bernadettean
But we
words.
got to talk more about sound, don't
You
we?
want to talk more about sound?
There was,
Please.
there was some other, but I don't know. No, we can talk about the
Well,
key. I don't know.
I have a
What-
thought about
go-
the sound
go,
before
yeah.
we go on. Is that there's this tone that sounds so smart and serious, and this, even just with the title, and that is kind of a register of the language that sounds like highfalutin or something. But then we've already talked about this a little bit, but then it's like undercut by this humor and the ethos of what she's saying that she's making fun of at the same time. So that's another way to think about the sonic registers of the poem that are happening simultaneously.
Yeah, I always feel
Leanne
like
Brown,
there's-
tell us about Bernadettean
Okay.
keywords, because you're implying that this poem is an ars poetica for Bernadette readers. You could start here, and because it is, after all, a complete introductory lecture.
Well, she'd always talk about the word moth as she says the moth is the muse. She would say that, but it's also like mother, mother, a moth that does something is a mother, mother. But I think they put the moth with the phrase that's right before it. What is sublime like a moth? It's not just like a moth. I thought it was thought by reading. It's what is sublime like a moth. Like it's in the middle of the night when the moth comes to the screen, and everybody's asleep, and this is the moment when she's reading these books and everything is connecting.
Well, it's a model of
Yeah.
unconsciousness,
Yeah.
the moth is, right? They're going to do what they do.
Yeah.
She's very
And it's not a
interesting.
butterfly; it's a nighttime creature. So
Yeah.
it's
Yes.
and it has that. It's so many levels of language that
Let's turn to the cultural politics, and maybe even just the politics of the dream of sharing that she has. That's so, Kay was talking about a hopefulness. This is like classic. So why don't we ask Lainey to read the last stanza, and let's all just riff on what's happening there.
Sure. It is to think this or that might include all or enough to entertain all those who already know that in this century of private apartments, though knowledge might be coveted, hardly anything is shared except penurious poetry, she or he who still tends to titles as if all of us are reading a new book called The New Life.
I mean, she just has such a way of ending the poem back with a vital book. But okay, so what's the argument?
Well, the first thing I thought when you asked to focus on this is that am I getting this right? The plural dream of social life, which is the title, I think the first title in the desires of mothers to please others in poetry. These themes have run through all of her work, a kind of disdain of private property, landlords, lack of basic human rights and
Right.
human pleasures
Right.
for all, freedom of sexuality. So when she says, private apartments, there's that scorn, and penurious poetry she's making fun of. It's not penurious poetry, meaning poets don't have any money,
But
including
it's only
her.
the poets who don't
But
have money who
right.
wind up being the sharers.
But
We
it-
should extend
right.
that.
But
That should
it
be a
isn't-
model.
It isn't poetry that's poor. It's the poet. So she's making fun of this idea that poetry is poverty.
Right.
And then those who are sharing the penurious poetry are reading a new book called The New Life. So there's this turn at the very end to this collective reading, that they are all reading this book, this new way of being.
which is La Vita Nuova, Dante,
Yes.
The New Life, and that's one of her model texts that she would always present. Is like
Right.
this is a way to write about the context of how the poem comes into being, because he writes a journal like this is I saw Beatrice in the square, and then I wrote this poem, like
Right.
this alternation of prose and poetry.
Right.
And it's in one of her experiments, right? To
Yeah.
rewrite it in.
It is the ultimate speculation of
yeah.
love, that book, which is what she's preparing us for. So it becomes a kind of cultural radicalism of sharing, of communality that's modeled in the impoverished poetry world in the unremunerative sectors of of literary sharing, in a century in which the model of the writer was, you know, Hemingway in Paris paying a few francs, writing everything by himself and not really interacting with anybody else. It's not really fair because he did hang around with some salon people. But my point is that she's referring to this notion that people who create art have to be by themselves, and she doesn't agree with that at all, right?
Right.
Yeah, there is another resonance that I want to bring out here that I think relates really intimately, which is the sense that Bernadette develops, I think, from very early on in her work, that thought, like anybody's thought itself, is one step away from becoming a book. And she says that in the in Piece of Cake, in the final entry of the book that she wrote with Louis Warsh in 1976, and that was published in like 2019. Finally available. She says, the 1,000 episodes the mind enjoys can make a book in a minute if you'd only write it.
Yes.
And that is really interesting. She's saying anybody who has consciousness is writing a book right now. You could actually just isolate that. That would be a book, right? And she has this like, again, it's an optimism about the relationship that everybody has to language that is worthwhile to be shared, and that is it's not like, oh, thought is already the book. But it's one step away. It's one mediation away.
Amazing.
So that's
I love it.
That's so good.
Radical
Now, if we
inclusion.
take what Kay is referring to, which is the idea that I won't repeat it, we can make books, we can write books, and people can do this. You're doing it now.
Yeah.
If we add that to Elaine's idea that this is a metapedagogical poem, that it guides us to learning, we get the greatest phrase of this thing, as if all of us are reading a new book, as if all of us are reading. We're not just all of us writing books, we are all reading one together. There's no such thing as private reading. Let's go around twice. The first time just to point at a phrase or an idea that hasn't been discussed yet in this conversation, and just to laud it or value it so it gets into the record. And the last round will be final thoughts on this poem, or final thoughts on what you get. How is this representative of Bernadette? Because there's a lot of Bernadette in ModPo at this point. And so this might turn out to be the way in. I don't know. Okay, Sophia first. A little piece of it that you want to draw our attention to?
I'm just thinking of this middle stanza and then awakening babies to turn and make notes. And I feel like the mention of babies is like, it leads us into this like, what's it called? To the next stanza where we're talking about the reptilian appellations and the, but it's also a moment where like her dailiness comes in pretty obviously.
Yeah.
But babies are also like the ultimate empty vessel. Like babies literally know nothing. And if they were learned
Poor
this
things.
way, like wouldn't we be better off for it?
Yeah. Beautiful. Lane.
Yeah, I just want to add to what Kay just said so beautifully, to talk about Bernadette's radical inclusivity as a mentor and a teacher and a friend of poets. It's an ethos in her work, but she also lived it in a way that was extremely rare and beneficial to generations of poets, myself included, in that, she genuinely felt this was true, and she genuinely, any new person who walked into the room, she was curious and she was interested, and she valued what might they might possibly write that they didn't already write, even if they were really young and had never written anything at all. And that's just such a remarkable gift to kind of flip this notion that, oh, literature is exclusive and it's only for certain people, which is like, that's such a harmful and not helpful point of view. But unfortunately, it's out in the world. And so meeting her as a really young poet and seeing how she behaved towards everybody and in her work was just miraculous.
Leanne, a phrase or a passage?
Well, we haven't talked about the phrase "one's own weaknesses." I like that she includes this. That it's not just all this grand knowledge making and seeking and sharing. It's like that has to be part of the work. It's to examine your own
I love that.
weakness.
Okay, a passage, a phrase?
I guess I'll emphasize, though knowledge might be coveted, which I think we haven't fully alighted on yet. And I think that that's very much the opposite of the thing that Lainey just talked about. And so she's very aware of all the ways that people are aggressively pushed out of learning. And convinced that there's somebody else who knows, but I don't know, right? And I don't know, and it's not for me. And she's like hyper aware of this sense that people have of like, oh, somebody else knows, but I don't know, and it's not for me. And let's say the big retooling that she wants to do with poetry and everything, and science of all kinds, has to do with her own thinking and dreaming and scheming about how to systematize a kind of knowledge or writing or poetry for everyone.
Fantastic. Okay, now, final thoughts. Anything that you want to say about Bernadette generally or about this poem generally? Sophia?
I feel like this speaks to what Lainey mentioned as well, but in the second to the last line, she writes, "who still tends to titles as if all of us." And I appreciate the phrase "tends to titles" because I feel like it offers like a kindness, it offers a generosity, it offers like respect to the language. And I feel like Bernadette Mayer plays with language so much and is so funny, but like has such a high respect for what it can do and what she can accomplish with it. And I feel like that's a micro moment of that instinct.
Thank you. Lainey?
I feel like this poem is an argument looking at different stages of human consciousness development, her own journey as a writer and exploring, and really making an argument that art is not separate from life and that nothing is separate from poetry, and that poetry is in everything that's in the poem, you know, science and reading and swim lessons and being a guppy and dreaming and the moth, which also makes me think about mortality and how much time do we have and so on. It's none of it is separate. It's all part of the envelope here. And I also wonder if she's echoing Woolf about the moth and thinking
Oh, you
about.
just let that dangle. You want to say a little more about...
No, I want to let people go where they
Okay.
they will.
Leanne Brown, how are you feeling about Bernadette after reading this poem?
Oh, in love. The titles as true as false leaves. Just the sound of that. It's. I always feel like there's this Latinate. She knew Latin poetry and she was schooled by nuns, but it's like totally also very, colloquial and vernacular. It's like there's a
And
weave
also
in the
tight
music.
as can be.
Yeah, there's a music.
sonically.
Yeah.
As true as
Yeah.
false leaves led me to believe,
Yeah.
leaves believe,
Titles as true as false.
inviting the
leaves.
ultimate speculation of love, leaves, believe, love, all those L's, all those V's. You know, she's just really working it. How do you feel?
it's a great poem. It's like I'm just, and it's at the end. It's near the end of sonnets.
Which Leanne originally
Published.
published.
Yeah.
Was the first publisher of sonnets.
So it's a very important book for me. Let's say I learned so much just typing it into the computer when we did it. It's part of my being, and I appreciate as unfolding it more today. It's like it makes me see it even more. So I'm really happy about that. But the other thing I want to say is that of course she also wrote this science writing book with Dale Worsley for teachers and writers. So this is beside her experiments list. There's this whole other book about
Teachers and
science
Writers,
writing.
the organization that is
Teachers and
Collaborative, yeah.
to
The art-
progressive education through poetry
Poetry in the
whatnot.
schools
Yeah,
program.
very
Yeah.
important organization.
Right.
Kay, final thought?
I guess I actually want to, my thought is about the sonnets and the fact that it's not a sonnet, and in the recording that you sent us before this session, she says in the reading, well, it's not a sonnet, but I wanted to put it with the sonnet. So that it's an interesting contextualization of her sonnets, which are intensely philosophical and argumentative, even as they're also like these beautiful, loving, intimate, sexy invitations. And then the dedication to Ted Berrigan, I think, is this other part of the poem that we haven't really thought about. But, think about Bernadette's sonnets that she was writing 20 years after Ted Berrigan's sonnets appeared, which are, in a way, they're so different because Ted Berrigan's sonnets are so like one line and then another line and then another line, and has, he repeats himself in all these different ways and uses like a cut-up method and collage, and in a way there's a playful traditionalism or maybe classicism about the way that Bernadette is going. Actually, like my sonnets are philosophical arguments about love, but she's doing that very much in mind and in the wake of what Berrigan did with his sonnets. So there's something here that's telling us about the scientific, let's say, or the knowledge-oriented aspiration of her sonnets. And as she indicates at the top, love too, she thinks, is a science or an invitation to knowledge.
I have a quick final thought, and I really adore this poem, and of course just could read Bernadette all day and every day and leave aside Freud and Darwin for another day. I'd rather read Bernadette. It's this, like she comes of age at a time when she's surrounded by a lot, I won't name too many, but maybe I'll name one, a kind of, 60s hippie poet who didn't really believe in knowledge the way Kay and others are saying. She has a very rigorous idea of knowledge, science, but she's surrounded by, in that period, a lot of, did I say hippies? That's the wrong word, but countercultural people. I'll give you an example. Richard Grosinger, great example. Sorry, I don't mean to malign somebody, but he was just writing offbeat poems. And she's very serious about that. She believes every bit as emphatically as they did that it's time for us to find our greatest poems on the back of a discarded envelope, which is at least writing. But even in that kind of liminal, street smart space, the grammar in the shadows slanted on the wall, so that's not alphabetical, unless it actually forms words. And then the moth comes back. So we've gone from notes, that can be poetry, shadows creating a grammar, that can be poetry. I'm thinking of, every third Bob Dylan song, poem is about how we can actually see language on shadows on the wall, etc. And then the bright night of the city, which is even further away from language, but that moth-like we are attracted to, and we make art out of it. And that takes us to babies, which is even a greater regression, back to pre-linguistic qualities. This is really, really a great way to take the counterculture and saying, I have a vigorous idea about looking at those shadows to find the words of my poems. It's amazing. Well, thank you. Thanks, everybody. Kay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Leanne, Lainey, and Sophia. This was great.
Thanks, Al.